Colgate Palmolive, and many more. So, Rich, a very big welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Pleasure to be here. So thanks for having me.
Rich, it's awesome to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time. I'd really love to dive into the first part of your career where you spent almost 20 years as a Navy SEAL. To me, having no military experience whatsoever, I find that quite fascinating. So I'd be really curious to just kind of dive into that initially. What initially drew you to becoming a Navy SEAL?
Well, let's see. Thanks, Callum. Thank you for having me as well. What drew me to be a Navy SEAL, that's an interesting question. I grew up wanting to be a Navy pilot, a jet pilot. I have a twin brother, and he and I were kind of bent on that pathway from an early age. I mean, we're talking like 6 or 7 years old. We wanted to be Navy pilots, and specifically Navy because Navy guys land on aircraft carriers, and there's nothing harder than that, we thought. So that's where we were kind of focused. It was really the early 90s. I found out about the Navy SEALs. I didn't know what they were. And I was like, oh, who are these guys? I started researching them and realized, man, this is a team I might be interested in being a part of. So going through university, I was in an ROTC program, which is a program that you can go through that helps. Basically, they pay for your college and then you get commissioned into the service afterwards. And I selected SEALs. I said to myself, well, I know I can be a pilot, but I don't want to always wonder if I could be a Navy SEAL. And so I tried out. Luckily I was selected for it. It's a very, very difficult selection process just to even get to SEAL training. And then I went to SEAL training in 1996. And of course, SEAL training is some of the most difficult training in the world. But once you're there, it's all on you. It's whether or not you're going to quit. And so I went through that and graduated, then began a SEAL career. So I think it was the idea of there's these guys out there, this team of warriors that they're not only special operations, but I think specifically they come from the ocean, they come from the water. And I loved everything about the ocean and the water. And so it seemed a good fit. And I'm happy to say I made it through out of a class. Our class started with 170 students and we graduated 38. And that's normal numbers for SEAL training. It's usually about a 90% attrition rate. So yeah, that began my career, and I never looked back.
I know from what I've heard about Navy training, it sounds like it requires a lot of grit to get through that, which I know is one of your attributes. You've outlined them, so I'm sure we'll get into that in more detail shortly. One of the questions I have for you around SEALs and leadership is, I feel like you get exposed to very strong leadership when you're in the SEAls. So I'm just curious to kind of hear your perspective. What sort of traits did you see from effective leaders during your time in the SEAls?
Yes. Well, so you do. And I think, well, one of the things we have to understand about the military, and this is regardless of any military around the world, because we work with so many, is that yes, you do have some fantastic military leadership, but you also have some lousy military leaders. It's not a for certain thing. I believe that I was fortunate in the sense that yes, I was in a community that typically had some very outstanding people, to include leaders. But I think B, we were thrust into an environment, i.e. war and combat, that I think accelerates those leadership qualities, especially the good ones, because the bad ones tend to not be successful. They tend to kind of go by the wayside. But I think the key ones were accountability. You always look for that in a leader. I think it was decisiveness, the ability to kind of make a decision quickly and efficiently. I think empathy is one of the strong leadership qualities. Courage, of course. So I think those were some of the ones. Authenticity. Those were some of the key attributes that I saw in the best leaders, and in essence the ones I tried to emulate myself as a leader.
Amazing. And in your book, you talk a lot about attributes sort of being, I guess, performance kind of under stress. You can demonstrate a skill whenever, but it's the attribute, when the sort of, when it really comes down to it, how do you deliver that under stress? Do you maybe have an example you could share from your time in the military where someone or sometimes stood out to you where they demonstrated that very well?
Gosh, there's so many. Well, I think the attributes. Let me just give you a couple examples just from training. And so in SEAL training. So SEAL training is in San Diego, California. It's 6 months long. It's called BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition / SEAL Training. Again, like I said, it's a 90% attrition rate. When you go through BUDS, you spend hundreds of hours carrying big, heavy boats on your head. You spend hundreds of hours exercising with 300-pound telephone poles and running around those things, and then freezing in the surf zone. And like I said, I went through in 96. In 2010, when I was actually doing this work, I began to do the attributes work. I looked back at my training. And I had at that point been on hundreds of combat missions overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. I can tell you with certainty that never on one of them did I carry a big heavy boat on my head or a 300-pound telephone pole. And so what I realized was that what they were doing to us in SEAL training was not, in fact, training us in the skills to be Navy SEALs. They were actually putting us into these environments to see if we had the qualities, if we had what it took to be Navy SEALs. And so that was one kind of illumination for me. The other one came in the version of a story told to me by an older Navy SEAL. He had been an instructor years back, and he said, Rich, there's a story of a kid showing up to Navy SEAL training one day, and he walked into the instructor's offices and he says, I want to be a Navy SEAL. And the instructor says, okay, well, you have to do a swim test. And the kid says, fine. And so they take him out to the pool, and it's an easy swim test. It's 50 meters, so 25 meters to one end, 25 meters back to the other end. But anyway, this kid gets all ready to go, and he jumps in the pool. And when he jumps in the pool, he proceeds to sink to the bottom of the pool. And at the bottom of the pool, he starts walking across the bottom of the pool to one end. He touches one end, and he walks across the bottom of the pool back to the other end. He comes up, he's gasping for air, nearly drowning. And the instructor looks at him and says, what the heck are you doing? And the kid, who's still trying to catch his breath, looks at the instructor and says, I'm sorry, instructor, I don't know how to swim. And at that point, the instructor pauses and he looks at the kid and says, that's okay, we can teach you how to swim. And so the question is, why does the instructor do that? He did that because he knew if this kid had the attributes, the qualities to show up to Navy SEAL training without knowing how to swim, he had everything inside of him that we needed to be a Navy SEAL. Teaching him the skill of swimming was going to be easy. And so I think when it comes to most professions, but certainly the special operations professions, the best of us, the best highest performing humans and the highest performing teams distinguish themselves not because they're able to perform when things are going great. They distinguish themselves because they're able to perform when things are not going great, when what hits the fan, when we drop into chaos and uncertainty and stress. And when we do that, we are running on attributes. And so it's super important that in any profession, but certainly the spec ops professions, but in any domain, we understand what elements we have about ourselves, so we understand how how we're going to show up and why we're going to show up that way in these points of uncertainty, challenge, and stress. So it's kind of a roundabout answer, I know, but I guess the quick answer would be, Callum, that almost every environment that I went into in combat was leaning on attributes, not just skill, because your primary job is to deal with the uncertainty and challenge and stress first. And once you start dealing with that, then you apply the skill. You don't shoot, then think. You think, then shoot. And to think, then shoot, you have to apply. It has to be attributes based, attributes focused.
So it's almost evaluating what are the innate qualities of that person versus the inherent skill that they have.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
If we fast forward, because that's a really nice example. Thank you for sharing. If we fast forward that into kind of a business context, how do you balance skill versus the attributes of someone when you're trying to build a high performing team or lead a given team? I'm really curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So the thing we have to understand is when it comes to teaming in any domain, first of all, team defined is simply any group of two or more people working together towards a common goal or objective. It's that simple. Now the distinguishing element for that for a regular team and a high performing team is that perform not only when things are going great, but also when things aren't going great. So all this to say, high performing teams can be found anywhere. It's not just business, not just athletics, that's just military. A high performing team can be a great marriage. A high performing team can be a group of friends on a trip or a group of folks working on a community project. But the idea is teaming, when it comes to teaming, it's not about necessarily all the skills that the team brings together. I came across years ago, this very interesting fellow. His name was Russell Ackoff. Russell Ackoff he had some interesting titles. He was a systems theorist. He was a behavioral analyst and a management science expert. He used to speak and relate systems theory to leadership. And he had some fascinating lectures on YouTube that I used to watch. I think he's deceased. I think he died in the early 2000s. But one of the things he used to say to his groups, his audiences, he said, if I took the best parts of every best vehicle on the planet and put them all together. So say one type of vehicle has the best engine, another type has the best suspension, another type has the best carburetor. Best parts of every best vehicle on the planet and put them all together in the center of the room, would I have the best vehicle on the planet? And the answer is no, you wouldn't have a vehicle because the parts wouldn't fit together. And he used to say that a system is never just the sum of its parts. It's a product of how they interact. And so goes with a team. A team is never just the sum of its parts. It's a product of their interaction. So what businesses have to understand, what any team has to understand is you can have all the best, most talented people, but if they're not interacting properly, you're going to have a toxic, non-performing, underperforming team. So businesses have to understand that, yes, while skills do matter and there are some prerequisites. So you wouldn't want to hire a CFO that has not been to accounting school, right? So there are prerequisites, but just because someone is the top talent doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best fit for the team. And sometimes in some cases, every skill is buttressed by attributes. We aren't able to even gain skills without using attributes to do it. In some cases, that person who may be the second best or even the middle talented or performer might, in your environment, accelerate to one of the best people on the planet because they're actually in an environment where they're actualizing their attributes in a meaningful way. So businesses just have to begin to understand that when it comes to teaming, we cannot ignore this critical piece of performance when we are picking teams or even performance evaluating.
And I remember you said when I was doing some research, you mentioned skills were relatively easy to showcase, kind of measure and assess. Attributes, not so much. So when you're trying to hire someone or select people for your team, how do you go about actually finding what attributes someone has? And I guess conversely, how can you best demonstrate the attributes that you do have?
Yeah. So the first thing, it's a great question. The first thing we have to do is understand which attributes we're looking for, because every team, every niche is going to have a specific, unique set of attributes that allows for or defines success in that niche. The list of attributes that are required to be a great Navy SEAL looks different than the list of attributes required to be a great salesperson or accountant. So that's number one. Number two is you have to, in the hiring process or the selection process, implement a little bit of stress, challenge, and uncertainty into the process. You can do this a couple ways. So let me give you two examples. One is an experiential example. So say, Callum, you and I wanted to hire someone who's great at sales. Okay. And what we might do is we tell this person on a Friday, we say, hey, come in Monday morning, you're going to sell us this pencil. Okay. We go home for the weekends. We come in Monday morning. This person proceeds to show up and just blow our minds with their pencil presentation. It's one of the best we've ever seen. The problem is we would not have learned very much. All we would have learned is that person is really good at going home, preparing, and then giving a presentation. So instead, what we do is on Friday, we tell that person, hey, come in Monday, you're going to sell us this pencil. When they show up Monday, however, we say, hey, the plan's changed. You're no longer to sell us this pencil. You're going to sell us this coffee mug. And oh, by the way, there's no audio visual, so just roll with it. Now, at this point, you and I have to basically deliberately divorce ourselves from skills assessment, because what we're about to see is going to be ugly. But now we're not looking at skills anymore. We're looking at how this person behaves. Do they make light of it? Do they make it happen? Do they just, do they roll with it? Or do they kick the dirt? Do they make excuses? Do they spiral downward? Now we're looking at attributes. And so attributes can be seen always on the periphery. They're very rarely what you're looking at directly. They're on the periphery of what you're seeing because they're influencing behavior. So that's one way, experiential. You can do this with the way you ask questions as well. If you ask a question that can insert a little bit of stress or uncertainty into that moment, then you get someone from a different optic. An example I'll give you is the group we worked out with. We worked with a construction company out in Colorado. These guys were awesome folks, and I would describe them as uber patriots. Okay, they had American flags everywhere. They're super pro military. They're really fun, really gracious guys. And I remember one of the key attributes they were looking for was open-mindedness. And so the CEO said, Rich, how would I ask a question that measured or showed someone's levels of open-mindedness? And I said, well, let me give you an example. And he said, okay. I said, give me 3 good reasons right now to burn the American flag. And you could tell when I asked him that, he almost had an aneurysm, right? But what I was trying to do is I'm trying to pull him out of his fishbowl to see if he could actually look from a different optic, which is what open-mindedness is. So I didn't make him answer, but he got the point is you can ask a question, and if you insert a little bit of stress, uncertainty, challenge, then you're going to start to pull someone out of their normal, usual response, their comfort zone, basically, and you can start seeing these attributes. But you have to really know what you're looking for before you start doing that.
Just a quick question before I hand over to Man. Was he able to answer
your question? Give me a chance.
No, I didn't force him. I gave him some examples, but I didn't force him.
Sorry, was that you?
No, that was it. Yeah, go for
it. Okay, great. Rich, I'd really love to delve into the workplace and business and the attributes of resilience and managing stressful situations and building trust. Mm-hmm. So I see that you've done work with Simon Sinek on building trust, and he says everything he's learned about building trust has come from you. What have you taught him that all our listeners and viewers would love to learn about?
Oh gosh, I mean, that's a whole nother lecture that we'd have to go through. But I'll give you the
The website, which we
yeah.
can all go and watch.
That's right. Let me give you the highlights. The basic, most important thing we have to understand about trust is that trust is not a feeling. A feeling is just a human emotion. Trust is in fact a belief. A belief is a human emotion that's been rationalized or justified by that human being, which reminds us of something very important. That is, we cannot make somebody trust us. All we can do is behave in a way that allows them to form a belief of trust in us, which means trust comes from behaviors. We behave in a way that allows someone to develop trust for us. So in that, we have to understand that our behavior, our personal behavior, which stems so much from attributes, right? There are some skills in there too, but things like authenticity, things like accountability, things like decisiveness, things like empathy, these are all attributes. And when you are empathetic to another human being, you are showing that person is feeling cared for. They're feeling that compassion, which means they're going to start building trust. When you are accountable, it's very rare that we look at somebody who's always pointing fingers at other people and say, that's someone I want to follow. It's very rare. And the reason is because we don't trust that. We don't trust that person. And leadership in essence is trust first. I mean, one of the reasons why we choose people as leaders is because we trust them. That's one of the key elements. And so the best, most I guess the most brief way to describe trust is about how we behave, and we cannot expect to have someone trust us if we don't go first in that behavior. A lot of times people approach a situation or a relationship and they say things like, well, I'm going to trust them when they prove it to me. And we're putting the onus on them. And that is not how trust works. Trust is a generative act. We have to go first, because if we don't go first, that person's not going to reciprocate. So if we want to build trust, we have to go first, and it has to be from these behaviors.
One of the things that I say, it'd be good to get your perspective on, is that when we have a new employee in the business, and we should give them that trust absolutely straight away. And if we had an example where you as a leader of the business have your new company car and you've just pulled up into the car park, and this new person says, I've got the meeting room ready and but we're out of coffee. Hand me your keys and I'll go and get the coffee for you. And what a leader should just say absolutely, and not think, oh my goodness, I don't know this person. They've only been in the business a few days.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's a wonderful example. I think there's an example of extending trust, and in whatever form that comes in, it could be, I'm going to give you the keys to my vehicle, but it could come in. I mean, the idea that people have to understand is trust doesn't have to be some of these behaviors don't have to be some of these big blatant acts of trust. A trusting act could be a manager or boss telling his or her employee, hey, you take the lead on this, and I have your back if you screw up, right? Trust can be as simple as someone stopping another person in the hall and saying, hey, how are you? And really listening to their answer. That trust can be built that way. And so yes, yes, your example is a good one. However, there are so many little examples of relationship, whether it be employee and employer, whether it be married couples, whether it be friends, where just little acts of care, of compassion, of character, of consistency build trust. And even trust can also be built very rapidly. I mean, we all know that, if the three of us are together in a building and smoke starts coming in the door, and someone runs into that room who we've never seen before and says, hey, follow me, I know the way out, and they take us out, we've just built trust very rapidly with that human being. So trust can actually be built rapidly based on intensity of environment as well. But we have to, I think the key is for all of us, whether we're employers, employees, is to understand, or in any relationship, is that trust is it's constantly built. It's those little things that we do every single day, and they're cumulative. And in some cases where where maybe intensity is low, that process may take a little bit longer. But it's kind of like going to the gym. If we go to the gym, in 1 week we go 3 times, and then we look in the mirror and we see nothing, we're like, well, we're not going to quit going to the gym. We understand that we just have to keep going to the gym over weeks, and then we'll start to see a change. And the same thing goes with these behaviors. So little behaviors, little steps are how we build it.
Yeah, really thank you for sharing those examples as well. And really good that we can build it in very small ways and small steps, all building and compounding. Let's talk a little bit about stressful environments. So you have worked in some of the most stressful environments ever, and you've listed out the sort of key attributes that you think are needed in stressful environments. Are they the same attributes that are needed in business in stressful environments? And what can leaders in businesses do to help prepare their teams, develop their attributes to perform extremely well in those stressful situations?
Yes, the good news is yes, they are the same attributes. I will say that it depends. Not every one of the attributes are required in every single stressful situation. But we're talking about things like courage. We're talking about things like adaptability, perseverance, compartmentalization, things like that. And so what we have to understand, and I think what people have to understand about stress and challenge and fear and uncertainty, is that it is a physiological response to an external environment. However, what that tells us is that physiological response, while identical in every human being, it's subjective in the sense that it's subjective in what's going to bring it on. So, in other words, the same thing that makes someone stressful or fearful is not going to be the same for the person next to them. You could literally have a group of Navy SEALs in Afghanistan in a gunfight with Al Qaeda, and in that moment feeling less fear than the 8-year-old you just asked to step in front of their classroom and introduce themselves. So fear is a subjective thing. But no matter what that fear is, courage is the ability to step into our fear, is the ability to take them to basically choose the fight response. We know when the fear response enters into our brain, our amygdala gets tickled and we have the fight or flight choice for us, right? But if we choose fight, it's a specific switch in our brain, and that's the courage switch. If we choose to step into our fear, we also get a dopamine reward for that. However, we cannot access that courage switch unless we have fear present. And so in other words, courage in any capacity has nothing to do, or your levels of courage have nothing to do with what you do for a living. Okay. You could be a generally anxious person. But because every single day, every moment you're stepping into your discomfort, you're high on courage. You could be someone who does crazy things. I don't know if you are familiar with Alex Honnold. There's a documentary called Free Solo. This guy does free climbing up enormous peaks. I mean, when you watch the documentary, your hands sweat because it's so crazy. But they looked at his brain, and they went in the documentary, they saw that his fear switch doesn't kick on the same way or at the same time most people's do. It takes a while for his courage switch to kick on, which means he's not accessing it the same way. Now, I'm not saying Alex Honnold is not courageous. I'm just saying that it takes longer for him to access that switch. We cannot have courage in the absence of fear. So I think what we have to understand as leaders, as teammates, when it means getting through stress and fear, uncertainty, the first step is understanding and encouraging those to step into their fear. And then there's other attributes that we can start to take into account. Adaptability, the environment's changing around us. How well are we flexing with that? Perseverance, do we keep on going, or do we have that effort in there? Compartmentalization is really big in terms of a mental acuity attribute, probably the most important one when it comes to dealing with stress, uncertainty, and fear. And that's really your ability to, out of a prioritization effort and your environment, to pick something to focus on and stay on that and block out everything else. That's probably the number one attribute for Navy SEALs to make it through training is, hey, I'm not going to worry about all this that I can't control. I'm going to pick one thing I can control, and I'm going to move to that. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to pick the next thing, and I'm going to pick the next thing, I'm going to pick the next thing, and then you slowly step through that. So I think those types of things can be both trained and encouraged by leaders. But again, I think courage, just like fear, is infectious, and you see it in the animal kingdom as well. You see a bunch of antelope in the grassy plains, and there's a lion stalking them, and one animal looks up and all the rest look up and they all run together, right? So we know, or if a better example for us humans is if we're on a flight going somewhere and we hit turbulence, if we look over and the flight attendants are all cowering and crying, we're going to be we're going to be frightened. But if we see them all talking calmly and just going about their business, we'll probably be calming. And so as leaders, as teammates, we have to understand that courage, just like fear, is infectious, and our response can help affect the responses of others. We should know that with kids too. So,
Callum and I took your attributes assessment, which is an online assessment. 200 and something questions. Great feedback from that. Very, very aligned to who we are as individuals. Is this something that you do when you work with organizations? You take them through this attributes assessment, and then what do you do after that when the team have completed it?
Yeah, and thanks for taking that, by the way. I was looking at your results. They're great. I want to say, though, when you take the assessment, a couple things to understand, a couple things that set this assessment apart. First of all, this is not a personality test. Personality tests are designed to show you how you are in normal everyday life with every normal stuff going on. This attributes assessment shows you who you are at your most raw. In other words, it's your performance fingerprints. So that's number one. And by the way, I love most of the personality tests. I've taken almost all of them. I would say the attributes buttress any one of those. You understand who you are in regular life, but then the attributes allow you to understand who you are at your very most raw. That's number one. Number two is that, as you both realize, you get a list of your 41 attributes from 1 to 41. So they're ranked in order, for 1 to your top attribute all the way to your bottom attribute. And what we have to understand and realize is that there's no judgment in those rankings, and we don't look at those top 5 and those bottom 5 as your strengths and your weaknesses. In other words, you are successful and strong. Both of you are successful and strong in what you do, as much because of your top 5 as your bottom 5. Your bottom 5, you being low in your bottom 5, have contributed to your success. Now, in that, what we do with organizations and teams is we allow people to say, okay, first of all, understand your performance fingerprint, understand why this order has served you, but let's do the honest introspection and ask ourselves, why or how has this order not served us? So in other words, there are some ways, some reasons how your top 5 have not served you, some blind spots you have to be considerate of. Same thing with your bottom 5. Well, there's tons of reasons why you're having those as your bottom 5 has served you. There's also ways and reasons or blind spots about having those bottom 5 has not served you. So the work we do with teams and organizations, we allow every team member to understand themselves at a very elemental level, understand and get comfortable with the fact that this is not a judgment, that we all have a unique performance fingerprint that we then can contribute to the team. And then what's cool is that we understand that, sometimes, usually in regular life, even though our attribute list is somewhat set, we can obviously develop attributes over time. What's happening most of the time in our environments is we're either dialing up or dialing down attributes. So in other words, if you're low on patience, based on environment, you may be at home, you might have to dial up your patience, because at home you need to dial up your patience. If you're high on, I have a buddy his number one attribute was humor. And I asked him, hey, do you sometimes have to dial down your humor? And he said, oh, yes, I definitely have to dial down my humor sometimes, because the environment's not going to appreciate the joke I want to tell. So what we're usually doing in different environments is we have a set order of the way we prioritize these things, and we're just dialing up and dialing down. The dialing up, dialing down takes conscious thought on our part. So the way your attributes rank are basically how you operate without thinking. And then when you dial up, dial down, it takes conscious thought. And so what we do is we allow teams to understand this about each other, about themselves, about each other. And they say, oh, wait a second. Now we can team in very unique ways, because now we're not judging anybody anymore. My low patience for this person and my frustration is because that person has high patience. So I think of that person as slow, but now I can appreciate that person's high patience can, in fact, in some cases, slow me down when I need to slow down. And so it takes the judgment out of these performance pictures and allows for really high performing, high efficiency teams.
Can I just jump in with a quick question? Rich, I'd be curious to get your perspective. What do you think is an attribute that most people either misunderstand or don't value as high as perhaps what they should?
Oh, that's a great one. And there's probably multiple answers to that, but let me give you the most common misunderstanding, and that is the difference between perseverance and resilience. Most people conflate those two. Perseverance is the ability to get knocked down 7 times and get up 8. I'm going to keep coming no matter what. It's a Rocky Balboa effect. Whereas resilience is, I get knocked off baseline, and how quickly and efficiently can I come back to baseline? It's that rubber band that you stretch, and then when you let go, it gets back to its original shape. Resilience is about recovery, whereas perseverance is about just keep going, keep going. And the reason why that matters is because these attributes can sometimes live independently of each other. In other words, I've worked with top performers who are high on perseverance and low on resilience. And what does that look like? That looks like someone who's headed for burnout, or who's already burnt out, because that's someone who's just going to go, 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 but they never take time to recover. And so people have to understand that a lot of people say, oh, I'm really resilient, but what they're actually saying is they're perseverant. They're conflating it. and they're just going to go, 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 and they're going to head to burnout. So there's multiple examples in the 41 of those types of what I call metonyms, where people think of attributes as the same thing, but they're not. But that's probably some of the most important when it comes to top performers.
Well, I'm glad you shared that. Thank you. Because I was looking at my report, and one of my top 5 attributes was discipline, and one of my bottom 5 was persistence. So I was curious to see what the difference between those two actually was.
Yeah. Well, discipline is
it's similar.
Yeah. A little bit different, but persistence is this idea that there's a steadfastness in your, there's a course of action that I just stick to, and I know it's going to work out. That's persistence. That's the stonecutter approach. The fact that you are low on that just speaks to the idea that you are someone who, when something's not working, you tend to just try something else. And if that's not working, you try something else, which is actually an enormously powerful trait, or quality, or even attribute. However, what the blind spot you have to be aware of is sometimes it might make sense in a moment just to stick to the course of action, because you may be drawn to change your course of action because you have a better idea, or you're going to adapt because you're high on adaptability as well. So it's just an indicator that you're low on it, but you may just say to yourself, hey, in this certain case, I need to stick to this course of action, because you may be drawn not to. That's what that means.
Glad you clarified. Thank you.
So, Rich, if you could go back in time and share something or a leadership myth that you believed at that time, but you've now debunked, what is it?
Oh gosh. Well, I think certainly as a younger leader, you come into this, you come in thinking that you have to be able to do everything, that you have to, this whole lead from the front idea, where you see the leader in the front of the train or the front of the posse leading the charge. And that is a huge myth. We know that the best leaders are the ones who influence, and they inspire, and they empower. And oftentimes they're maybe in the middle or the back, and they are really generating the team to be its best self. So I think that's something fortunately I learned that fairly quickly, but I think I came into my career thinking that was the truth, and learned very quickly that's not how a team runs, and that's not your job as a leader of a team. Your job as a leader of a team is to make the best team work, and that's not about you in front telling people to follow you. It's just not. And so I think that's the biggest one.
Rich, it's been brilliant to have you. I mean, I know we could carry on talking and dive into these topics. The attributes assessment, I will share that in the show notes, and you very kindly have offered a discount on that. So we'll share that for everybody to go and have a look at. It's fascinating and gives a deep insight into our own attributes. So as we wrap up, I'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Rich. It's been so insightful, so enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation. So.
And likewise for me, Rich. Thanks so much. And I really enjoyed the conversation too.
Thank you.